What's up, Purdue fans? Welcome to another episode of Boiler Banter. I am Brandon Brown, joined as always by Dustin Schutte. And Dustin, man, the Boilermakers gave it the old college try against the number one seed Houston Cougars on Friday night. I personally had Purdue picked to win the game in my bracket with my buddies. They came up 2 points short, man, 62-60. Really had a chance all the way through. Hung around, played very well and had a shot at the end, but did fall a little bit short. Now we got 4 1 seeds in the tournament, which is kind of crazy. I know people pick that almost every year, and it never happens, but this year it did. So obviously, Houston, a very good team. I think a lot of people thought they'd win it easier than that, but Purdue played a good one, man, and they almost got it done.
Yeah, I talked. That was probably one of the best overall performances, like start to finish, we've seen. I know Purdue had some big wins. They beat Ole Miss. They beat Alabama. They had a nice win against Indiana. They had some really good wins throughout the season. But I thought with everything at stake and kind of the way they finished the season, right? It's been drilled into the ground. They lost 6 of their last 9. And entering the tournament. And I thought that they played maybe their best basketball in those 3 games. Really took care of High Point, really took care of McNeese, and then put up a really good fight against Houston. And I think the thing that was most impressive about that was you could go a couple different ways, right? The fact that with like 7-8 minutes to go, Houston buried a 3-pointer and it was a 10-point game. And it looked like that was probably the kill shot. It was like, okay, this is where Houston, like if you're down 10 points to Houston, that's like, being down 28 points to the New England Patriots, right? Back in the Tom Brady days. Like you're not coming back from that. Just because their defense is so stifling, but they hung with it. Their bench, I thought, played extremely well. CJ Cox gave them some big buckets. Miles Colvin and Cam Heide both hit some timely shots. So it was a really good overall effort. I thought Braden Smith getting doubled every time and still coming away with 15 assists. It was just a matter of, however you look at it, whether there's a couple things that beat them in that game. They couldn't get a rebound. Houston lived off the offensive glass. You can look at that last inbound play where, to me, I think everything Purdue did defensively was correct. It was just that was really good offense beating really good defense, and Kelvin Sampson drawing up the perfect baseline out of bounds play. Or you can look at maybe some of those officiating calls late. I still think Milos Uzan got away with a push-off on Braden Smith on that final offensive possession, but that's how the ball bounces. Sometimes you get calls throughout the course of the game, sometimes you don't. And the bottom line is if Purdue grabs, 4 or 5 more rebounds, they're probably playing in that Elite 8 game against Tennessee and with a chance to go to the Final Four. So, but overall, I think there were some things that were probably frustrating, but I think when you look at the overall performance, if you go back and watch that game with a clear mind, that was about as well as I think Purdue could have played in that environment, in that circumstance. If you didn't have a rooting interest, it was a really good and fun college basketball game. And one of the few really good basketball games we've gotten in March Madness this season. It's been, I don't want to say a dud, but it's been maybe one of the less exciting tournaments in terms of just thrilling finishes and big upsets and everything. But the Houston Purdue game gave us something to kind of cling to. That was an awesome finish.
Well, we talked about this last week before they tipped this one off. Purdue getting out of the first weekend and then kind of going from there, I guess. Everything kind of went according to plan, and that's when it doesn't, that's what makes March Madness awesome. But I mean, they won their first 2 games like they were supposed to and lost to the 1 seed. I mean, that's how you kind of draw it up on paper. So how does it feel? I mean, it was close. They had a shot, could have upset the number 1 seed. So how does it feel now that the season is over? Just kind of taking it all in. They were picked to win the Big Ten. They didn't. Player of the Year, Braden Smith. You got Trey Kaufman-Renn had a great season out. Looks like they'll probably both come back. We've talked about that before too. Just in a nutshell, Purdue basketball season this year was what?
Yeah, I don't want to say it was better than expected, right? Like you said, they were picked to win the Big Ten, and they finished tied for 4th, but they were 6th in the standings, But to me, Brandon, if they win one more regular season game, if they don't have that second half collapse against Ohio State, or if they close out against Illinois, whatever, they go 14-6 and they finish 2nd in the Big Ten. And I think you feel really good about that. And you got to the Sweet 16, which I think if you said on paper this team's going to finish with maybe the overall record's a little bit disappointing just because I think Purdue's been spoiled by undefeated non-conference seasons coming off a run to the national championship game. I think if you said top 5 in the Big Ten and Sweet 16 run, I think a lot of Purdue fans would have said, yeah, after losing Zach Edey, two-time National Player of the Year, after losing Mason Gillis, Big Ten Sixth Man of the Year, Lance Jones, a starter, I think a lot of people would have taken it. It just kind of stings the way you lost that game because it wants you leaving more. I think if Purdue loses to Houston by 12 to 15 points, people look back and maybe it's not the same kind of exciting game, but I think they said, yeah, this is about where we expected. But because there's that overall sting. But I think the one thing that you look forward to from that performance against Houston is, you should have. Now we'll see what happens with the transfer portal. There's already been a few guys who have entered, but the bulk of your team is probably going to be returning next season. So this is a team that made the Sweet 16, was in the Big Ten hunt for a majority of the season. There's a good chance that they are Final Four bound next season, and that's in Indianapolis. So if there's ever a time that you're going to have a home court advantage in that tournament, it's going to be then.
It is funny, man, how the finish of a game. I mean, a loss is a loss, but you're right. When it's close, like you're just like, we had them, we were right there. Like, that just makes you put it perfectly. It just leaves you wanting more because you feel like there was something else there as opposed to like a double-digit loss. Like, we tried, gave it our best, and you just kind of pack it away. So, that's very interesting. Well, you mentioned the transfer portal. That's going to be guys leaving. That's going to be guys coming in. Every single program in the country is doing that. There's a record, over 2,000 guys have jumped into the portal since it's just bananas now. It's going up and up and up every year, faster, more people, decision making happening faster. So 2 guys have jumped in the portal from Purdue. That's redshirt sophomore big man Will Berg and junior forward Brian Waddell. Just quick notes on them. I mean, I'll be honest, when you told me their names, I'm like, I don't know a whole lot about these 2 dudes, so I don't know what that really means for the roster. So why don't you fill me and us all in on that?
Yeah, so I mean, it just clears up some roster space, really. And I think if you would have asked Purdue fans who are a couple guys to keep an eye on, this has been a discussion amongst, professionals who cover Purdue and just the common fan. Like, those are 2 guys that everybody kind of expected to enter the portal. Will Berg was a guy who he just could never maybe quite find his footing. And I asked Matt Painter about this because he played extremely well in the High Point game. He came in and gave him 11 really good minutes, helped him get some defensive stops. He got a couple buckets in that game. He remained incredibly professional throughout the season. Like, there were times when he was a starter. He started 3 games earlier this season when Daniel Jacobson got hurt. There were times he came off the bench. And then as kind of the season progressed, his minutes fell off. He just didn't quite fit into what they wanted to do. But towards the end of the season, when freshman Raleigh Burgess was, kind of maybe dealing with some stuff, they brought in Will Berg, and, it might have been 90 seconds and it might have been 9.5 minutes, but he seemed to give them some really good effort down the stretch. So, that wasn't too big of a surprise, especially with Jacobson coming off the injury. It seems like Purdue, Riley Burgess will be a sophomore next season. It seems like Purdue's going to go after a big guy or maybe 2 in the transfer portal. There just probably wasn't going to be room for him. So I think probably Will Berg is looking at maybe a transfer, maybe to a high mid-major, maybe just to a mid-major. But that one wasn't too much of a surprise. And then Brian Waddell, who came to Purdue with an injury out of Carmel as a freshman. And he's another guy that when he was on the court in those final, he didn't really see much playing time until the end of games when they were well decided. He was a guy that would always come in and play well. There just isn't a lot of room in the rotation for him, especially with Trey at the 4. And again, I'll mention Raleigh Burgess in that mix. I think he's another player that in another role could probably see 15 to 20 minutes per game. I don't know if he's a starter, but I just think that those 2 guys were kind of expected to hit the transfer portal because of the crowdedness in that Purdue locker room and the fact that they just weren't able to quite carve out roles for themselves in West Lafayette. So I think that those 2 guys will be really solid additions to wherever they land at their next destination. It was just too crowded in that locker room, too much talent for them to really carve out a role for themselves at Purdue.
And on the flip side, you gotta hit the portal and you gotta hit it quick. I mean, it's almost certainly every team in the country would rather be playing still, but when you get knocked out of the tournament, then let's turn the page immediately, focus on roster building and who's leaving, who's staying, who's coming, all that good stuff. So the Boilermakers have already hosted one guy, Oscar Clough. And like you said, we'll probably bring in, I don't, well, we'll get to that, what the total number might actually look like. But one guy's already been on campus, and I think they're working on a couple more. So what's the latest with him?
Yeah, it sounds like he was on campus on Sunday. Now, I had heard whisperings that he was going to be on campus on Sunday anyway, but I wasn't sure how accurate that was because this was before the game on Friday. So it's like, well, I don't think he's going to be on campus if they lose. Or if they win. Like, I don't think he's going to be there if they win because they'll be in Indianapolis playing. So I wasn't sure about the timeline of it, but there were a lot of rumblings that he was going to visit Purdue and Iowa State. Now, Iowa State, and off the top of my head, I can't remember the kid's name, but a former Virginia kid recently committed to Iowa State. And so I think that gives Purdue a really good chance with Oscar Clough. He was a guy that averaged more than 17 points, 12 rebounds per game a season ago at South Dakota State. Before that, he was at Washington State for a season and played a few years of junior college basketball. So he's kind of been a guy that's elevated his game a little bit. Again, I don't know if that's the kind of player that comes in and is going to be a starter right away alongside Trey, or if he's going to be the kind of player who maybe comes in and gives help that rotation behind Daniel Jacobson and Trey. So help give those guys a little bit of a breather, maybe sees 15, 20 minutes per game. I don't know what kind of role that's going to be, but that would be a huge addition for this Purdue team because let's face it, this is a team that did not rebound the basketball very well. And if you have a guy, I don't care what level it is, mid-major, low mid-major, high mid-major, somebody averaging 12 rebounds a game, they're going to give you a little bit of juice on the glass. So I think that's what Purdue's looking for. Obviously, the return of Daniel Jacobson is going to help. And then I don't know where else they're going to look. They do have one recruit coming in, Antoine West Jr. from Ohio. I know Matt Painter thinks a lot of him. He's probably going to be in that wing, that 2 or 3 spot, probably a shooting guard or a small forward. So I don't really know what that leaves. Maybe they go after another big. Maybe they go after another wing in the transfer portal. But throughout the course of the season, throughout the course of the late end of the season, from about the Big Ten tournament on, Matt Painter's been talking about, we're gonna get involved in the transfer portal. We're just probably not going to use it as much as some of the other teams. So to me, that makes me think and makes me believe that the Purdue transfer number out is going to be relatively small, and small could still be 3 or 4 guys. I don't know what that number is, but the fact is he expects the majority of this team to return, and they're just going to add some pieces via the portal. So Oscar Clough, I think, would be a huge addition. Just from what he gives him on the rebounding side, he gives him good size at 6'11", basically another 7-footer. So Purdue would have, even though Wilberg transferring out, you're going to have essentially 3 7-footers on the roster with Raleigh Burgess at 6'11", Oscar Clough at 6'11", and then Daniel Jacobson at 7'4". So I'm interested to see where else they would go. I don't know if they need a guard. So my expectation, in addition to a big, would be either another big or they're going to go with a wing. So we'll just kind of see, but right now Clough is really kind of the only name that's popped up as a visit guy to Purdue so far.
Just a quick little bit of house cleaning. That was Blake Buchanan, the big from Virginia,
yes.
transferred to Iowa State. Another 6'11" guy who can kind of do the 4-5 thing. So yeah, similar guys there. So yeah, that you would think maybe bodes well for Purdue's chances if they were kind of both looking at that same, Iowa State also looking at Clough, and then they land Buchanan. That was just yesterday. So yeah, that's probably a positive development for Boilermakers. I find it interesting, and we'll close with this, Dustin. We talked about that graphic last week where all 5 guys were from Purdue, and they were the only team in the Sweet 16 that could claim that. And now you're talking about Matt Painter openly addressing the transfer portal, and he seems to, he's kind of an old school guy, but he definitely seems to get it. I mean, you understand, like, look, if you want to play, this is the way you got to play. How do you think that works out for him? He's talking about, these end of the year meetings with the guys that are maybe coming back or a couple guys that are leaving. He's hosting guys from other schools. Like, how big of a philosophy change is this for him, for Purdue, the culture, just kind of all of that, when you have to build your roster through the transfer portal, or you'll get left behind? There's just really no way around it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think he's using that more, the portal, and obviously I don't want to say his hands are tied, but it does kind of depend on what your players are going to do. Now, through the first 4 or 5 seasons of this, he's been able to recruit guys that he knows want to stay, that they want to win. But now, is he going to be able to do that over the next 4 or 5 years? I think that's going to be a huge question. If a bunch of players leave, he's going to have no option but to build through the transfer portal. Now, right now, they're able to build for recruiting and then add some complementary pieces. And I think that's what you're going to continue to see. Remember, Lance Jones was a transfer player last year. He was a graduate transfer from Southern Illinois. The year before, they had David Jenkins, who was a graduate transfer, and you're going to ask me where from, and I don't remember off the top of my head. I think he had been at a couple different schools. But Purdue has added players from the transfer portal before. Usually they've had guys that like Johnny Hill and John Octius, guys who have been experienced at the guard position. That's kind of been what they've sought after in the transfer portal. So he's not opposed to it. I just don't think he wants to make a living off of living in the portal. I don't know that you're ever going to see a Purdue team that has 4 or 5 starters from different schools. Could that change at some point? Maybe.
David Jenkins, by the way, South Dakota State, UNLV, and Utah all before Purdue.
Yeah.
So there you go.
And I could not.
The age of the transfer portal right there.
Exactly. So we'll see how it goes, but I think his philosophy is working right now. That's a team built on. I think they know that they can win, and they can win at a high level, which is why you're not dealing with the transfer portal as much right now. But we'll see in 3 or 4 years. He may have to completely scrap his philosophy, but I think right now the fact that he's honest with everybody, that seems to be a big thing. And even when I talked at Big Ten Media Days with a bunch of the guys, it was a lot of that. He was up front and he told us how it was going to be. And that's, for a lot of the kids that he recruits, that seems to be a real sticking point. So that's why you haven't seen a big number transfer out. And so far, now we'll see if anything else pops up or occurs or anything like that. But it seems like a lot of that, the guys who transfer out, it's more about playing time as opposed to like teams swooping in and stealing players from NIL.
Yeah.
Not to say that can't happen in the next couple of weeks or whatever, but it's just strictly like Wilberg and Brian Waddell were buried on the depth chart, and they want to, they've spent a lot of time at Purdue and they don't see a path to playing time. And so they're going to go somewhere else and try to make a bigger impact at another school. And I think that's, if you're a Purdue fan, I think that's a positive sign. Like, guys aren't being poached over bigger NIL deals. Now, again, could that change? Absolutely. But as of right now, that doesn't seem to be the case. And I think that that's a good sign of kind of the health of the program.
Do you think, do you think Painter's well equipped for this kind of this shift? I mean, you hear, a guy like Tom Izzo just openly blasting the way it's done right now. And I think he was more hung up on like the timing of it. It's like, why, you could just shift it by a couple of weeks and it wouldn't interfere with the tournament and guys still playing. And, as a Michigan fan, like Justin Pippen enters the tournament just before Michigan's Sweet 16 game. Enters the portal right before the Sweet 16 game. And Tom Izzo was asked about it. And he's like, look, I got a team. I'm trying to win games. I'm not worried about the portal right now. And, then you've seen other, big time coaches, Jay Wright hung it up, Jim Boeheim, John Beilein. Like, these guys were like, I'm kind of done with this. Alabama's Nick Saban, was like, I'm sick of recruiting my own players. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. How does Matt Painter, you think, fit into that? He's a very tenured guy. He's been at Purdue a long time, but he's not old, but he's probably, like I said, he's a little old school. I find that very curious with some of these coaches who've been doing it one way for a long time, and now it's very, very different.
Yeah, I think he'll be okay if that becomes the path that they have to take, for the simple reason of he is very good at adjusting. And some of his assistant coaches have harped on this too. Like, the way he orchestrates practice now is vastly different from, 15 years ago when he was having guys doing sprints constantly, throughout the offseason and stuff. And so he's able to adjust. He's kind of ahead of the times. He talks about how he's on a lot of different committees. So I think he's kind of up to date with this stuff. And I still think he's very relatable. And so I think that he'll still be able, if you had a team full of 10 guys that transferred out, I think that Matt Painter would be flexible enough to go out and get 10 guys that he think could fit together, work well. And, I'm not going to say they're going to produce a national championship, but still would be near the top of the Big Ten. But it's interesting. Like, to me, the bigger question is not going to be successful, but it's kind of that thing you pointed at. Like, where does he get to the point where he's like, I don't want to do this anymore. But I don't think that's just a Matt Painter question. I think that's for anybody that's been coaching college basketball for a while. You could maybe throw like guys like Shaka Smart in that, guys who have been around, who have done Buzz Williams. I don't know. It's just a changing game, but it seems like Matt Painter has adapted pretty well, and it doesn't seem like he's planning on going anywhere. He's adjusting for the times. And so if there's ever a case where they have to build through the portal, I think Purdue would be just fine, but You never know, because then you're getting into the NIL game and all that kind of stuff. So we'll see. But I think for the most part, he'll be fine. Purdue will be fine, and we'll just see how this kind of goes, because he has talked about too, like, we're going to get to a point where there's just like a cap, like there's a salary, and that might level the playing field a little bit. I don't know, but I think at some point, I think that this stuff is going to slow down, at least to some degree, because you're going to have so many kids that just end up not getting an opportunity. A second opportunity. So we'll see. I know that's a long-winded answer, and I went a lot of different avenues there, but I think he would prefer to build the old school way, right? Like, let's build through recruiting. Let's keep our guys. And if we can't, then we'll add some pieces through the portal. But if his hand is forced and he's got to add a team where it's primarily portal guys, I think he'll be able to do that just fine too.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. I mean, all the different avenues and the different, what ifs and maybes, whatever, with Matt Payne. Because I was just looking this up. He's only 54, but he's been at Purdue for 20 years.
Yeah.
That's where he's a little different than a Shaka Smart and a Buzz. Like, they've been at multiple schools, kind of adjusting to different things he's done it one way, or his way, I guess it's not one way. He's probably adapted to many things over 20 years, but yeah, I think it's just an interesting thing. Some guys are probably much more accepting of change, and others might not. I mean, you see that in every avenue of work you've ever been in. You've got those old people who are like, I can't stand that we're changing this to a much easier, more efficient system. It's like, well, it's better for you. Like, just give it a shot. Not saying that the transfer portal era is better, but it's different, and guys are adjusting to it, some very, very easily, and some are probably pretty resistant, and some have chosen to hang the whistle up completely. So yeah, I just think it's interesting. So there you go. He's Dustin Schutte. I am Brandon Brown. We'll be back next week to see, I guess we'll just keep kind of following the roster development a little bit, and any other breaking news that pops up. They are still playing football, I believe, in West Lafayette, so we'll see if that comes up at all. But until next week, again, he's Dustin, I'm Brandon. Thanks for listening, everybody.